Morning. Here we go.
Good morning. Morning, Deon. Very nice, Deon
Morning,
Joubert,
Louise.
to join
Morning,
us
Gerald.
today.
Hello.
Yeah, lovely day. It's not going to be piping hot in the Cape, but it's going to be pleasant. For the I always spoke about Natal being the last outpost, but I'm guessing we're fitting that kind of description quite well now. We like the outpost at the moment, but it's going well. The
Indeed.
outpost. Thank you very much.
It's going
that's
well.
good.
Deon, you've got quite a formal title. You work for CGA and your title is Special Envoy. Please help us here.
Man, it's the official title is Special Envoy, Market Access. So it was a little bit of a humdinger when I started off, because they principally wanted me to work on market access and the technicalities of market access for citrus. At the time, CBS was prevalent, and so it was sort of what do you call someone that works on something as specific as that? So we decided, okay, that sounds, you could have got a special envoy for anything in the world these days. So let's call me. So that's
Well,
why I ended up. Okay, so
what is an
it was-
envoy?
Sounds very impressive. So there you go. You are the Special Envoy, and from what I understand is you principally work with the EU. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think the original problem came by the EU, and then we included North America or the US, because that had a very specific problem, which is very much related to the same kind of focus that I do on, or what I follow in Europe. So that was added, and at the moment I'm sort of doing anything that comes along, which is market related or not market related, what that has the most impact financially.
So what kind of background would somebody like yourself have to become a special envoy in a situation like this? It's a difficult thing to do, but give us a little bit of your background, how you got to this point with the Citrus Growers Association.
Okay, sure. So I did all the normal things, went to university, did agriculture, did my master's in monetary economics. God knows why I decided to go away from agriculture more to economics, but in any case, that's where it ended. And I worked for the Ministry of Agriculture, or DALRAD at the time, for 15 years, and it became rather interesting. The first 8 years I was the extension officer or an economist in the Western Cape. So worked on most of the systems and the financial, margins of production and systems in the Western Cape. And then I went to Brussels. I was drafted, and I spent the year in Pretoria with Department of Marketing, which had at that time the responsibility for controlling and directing the people abroad on South African policy. And I went at a very good time. So Mandela was out of prison for about 6 months. So when I went in June, so it was a brilliant time. Everything opened up, and we had extraordinary access suddenly from being the skunk of the world suddenly to become really welcome everywhere. So I had an interesting run. I think we did 10 or 15 agreements with the EU, and I was part of South Africa becoming the first international organization we entered in was FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, which is in Rome. So I did that. So no, if I complain, I'll be disingenuous. So I had a fantastic 15 years with the Department of Agriculture, in specifically the market access side. So the general agreements on tariff and trade, which is now turned over to be the WTO, World Trade Organization, and that was that. And then I went to work for the citrus fruit industry for another 15 or 18 years in different capacities. And then the citrus industry sort of got me back, because they ran into some problems with regard to what we would call phytosanitary measures in the EU. Specifically, it was black spot and FCM. And some of the guys who worked in Europe, who were friends with me at the time, some at Freshfell or CMO, and they said, well, you need someone who's got some track record or some knowledge of what's going on here, as you're going to run into different technicalities. So They offered me a job, I think, in 2014, and so this year in April, in a month or so, I'll be working 10 years for the citrus industry on technical market access.
Wow, what an incredible journey! And having been, having been at the right place at the right time, I would imagine it's one of those things whereby you met a lot of people who today probably you still speak to.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is, I mean, I know more people in the Commission probably than I know in the Ministry of Agriculture. So it's interesting, and I was very enthusiastic when I went, and Ati Swart unfortunately passed away now. He was director of marketing, and I asked him very, enthusiastically, what should I go and do in Europe? He said, well, the most important part, make sure we pay you every month. So that was very pertinent and a good start to my career. So no, I had
it's an important part, I would say.
No, it is. But we were lucky. We did the wine agreement. We became part of FAR. We did the meat agreements, abattoirs. We had market access on everything, on fruit and stuff. So now I had a fantastic time, and I came back and I worked for 3 years at the Ministry of Agriculture at the Parliament for the minister, and then the department. So I had a personnel of about 40. I led that division for about 3 years, and I worked for Cruyff and Niekerk, and then for Derek Hanekom. So, and then after 15 years, I said, okay, well, it's perhaps time to do something different. So I went to the Deciduous Fruit Board. We closed that one down. And then I started Unifruco and Capespan, which was a fantastic time, 18 years of that. And now the last 10 years has been really what I thoroughly enjoy. And that's trying to plot a course or find a way keeping our fruit, our citrus fruit in Europe and in America. So that's really rewarding, and the industry is just bloody fantastic. It's a unbelievably robust, unbelievably creative. There's a lovely saying about farmers. I worked for them my entire life. They are difficult guys. They're stubborn. They are full of, I would say, rubbish and complex. But God, can they farm? They've got this ability to pack an exceptional standard of fruit for the export market. So both in deciduous and citrus, it's just extraordinary, the product they put outside. That's why they're so popular. I mean, they do unbelievable work, and I mean the subsidy effect is virtually minimum. So I'm very glad to be here. I mean, I'm done now. I'm 66, 67, I think, in November. But they've kept me on, and they look after me well. So I'm happy to be here, and it's a very exhilarating job. It's very, you have to really dig deep sometimes and find policies and stuff which you think can make a difference. So I'm really happy to be here, and I'm thoroughly grateful to the entire industry. They acknowledge and they support, and they are very grateful that what I do. So yeah, I'm happy where I am.
That is very good. So Deon, I think let's get into the nitty-gritty of why we asked you to come and chat to us. For the last 2 years, there's been a lot of talk about this whole FCM issue and everything around it. And we had a brief chat just before we started. I think if you can do that again for the people watching, it could be very interesting and could lead to some questions possibly.
Okay, let me try this way around. So the first thing is that you have to have a perspective of why are we struggling with FCM and false calling mot and CBS? Why is South Africa's industry struggling with regulation from the EU? So the first part, it's important to notice that normally in the world, you would have the guy who's most efficient in producing a product produce it, because he's the cheapest, he's the most consistent, he's the most sustainable. The unfortunate thing is not. So if you look at subsidies in agriculture, why is that such a big issue? So the biggest developed countries have massive subsidies. So if you look, America, the US, China, Japan, Switzerland, support the agriculture tremendously under two headings. The first one is what we would call it socioeconomic policy. So they want to keep the rural areas occupied. And the moment you put a subsidy into that, you distort. So you principally make people which are not competitive, you give them a life. So that's the one part. So socioeconomic. And the second one that the governments love to use is what they call food security. So everybody, South Africa was under sanctions for a long time. So food security was important. So we couldn't import, we couldn't get. Well, that was the story. And a lot of support inside to keep South African, that there's food on the table. So those are the two headings. But most of it's actually rubbish. I mean, there's pools of meat, grains, oils in the world. and most of the if you look at developing countries, Africa, for as an instance, is highly effective. Now, we talked about if you take the Karoo and you take something like sheep farming, there's very little that can utilize that growth in the Karoo. Sheep can. The same in Australia. So the most cost-effective, the most efficient way to produce meat would be in South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, wherever where there's virtually they eat cellulose, which is green matter, and they put it into meat and something valuable. Well, the biggest production of meat is in feedlots. I mean, that's not efficient. It's highly subsidized, and they keep the competition at bay. So instead of Africa being a massive exporter of agriculture, Europe and America and all the developed countries are keeping that, call it natural competition away, and under those headings are subsidizing themselves. To give you an idea, that when I did we did the WTO and the old GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, the subsidy that South Africa had internally for agriculture was roughly about 20%. It was the old GSP system, and GAIS, and some of you will remember them still. And Europe was about in 60-65%. So under a whole exercise, the Uruguay round, the Brussels round, which I was involved in, we brought that subsidy down. So South Africa at the moment is on nothing. So they measure that subsidy. I think it's 0.5% at the moment. They say South Africa's got a 0.5% subsidy effect, and that's because we've got great roads and harbours. Now, a lot of guys will argue with that but that's the point. Europe is on 40%. So what it actually means is that 40% of the price of any agricultural product in Europe is paid by the taxpayer. So when you buy it for €1, 40% of that is already paid by the taxpayer. That's the subsidy, and that's under the Common Agricultural Policy. So that's where they subsidize a product. So it's very difficult to compete with them because they don't, 40% of their price is already paid as a direct, subsidy to a grower. So South Africa to export into Europe and compete well is actually a bloody miracle with a subsidy effect. So that's the distortion that you have worldwide with regard to agriculture. But that was changed a little bit. Yep, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt you. That's I just want to understand that subsidy correct. Is that subsidy the government subsidizing their own growers or subsidizing the product on the shelf?
No, it's a direct. It will be, well, there's lots of instruments, but you would call it, what we call it, direct payments, indirect payments in agriculture. So you have a couple of headings. The one is what they call quantitative restrictions. You can't import. So you can't import at any stage. And then there would be a tariff. And the third one would be then something like phytosanitary or zoosanitary that we struggle with. So the government will pay direct subsidies. The Common Agriculture Policy, if I remember correctly, is something in the vicinity of the PSE is 40%. And it's extraordinary. I in fact, this morning, just for the discussion, I looked at it now. So the European Union's current subsidy on agriculture is $101 billion a year. Now that's a lot of money. China is at 185, and the US is at $50 billion. So that's what you compete with. So for you to compete with a product, meat, grains, oil seeds, and they already have subsidized. I mean, a lot of the growers in Europe, and it's not being disingenuous, should and actually compete in a normal market. So they're highly protected with direct subsidies and tariffs to sort of unravel or let's say compete with imported product. So the argument is that, and that's the state of play. But all those things have been set in the early 90s. I think 94, 96, we did our last round, which was then the Brussels round. And from then on, that's what it is. So what you now have is, as everyone in the world is misusing stuff like agriculture, or let's say phytosanitary, to try and limit imports. And that's what I work on. So I work on these, call it phytosanitary, where that's what they say, where the tire eats the tarmac. That's the argument or the issue where we try and unravel the EU's, call it tankering with imports and protecting imports, or they're trying to protect their own growers with imports. And that is misused. So most of those things does not have substance. And it's very much quasi science most of the time. So that's the background of it. So that's what I work on. So my job is to try and find a way and keep South African citrus in Europe, and even though they are using these measures against us, and we've been very successful over the last 10 years. It's cost money, but we're there. We're still there.
Sure. Very interesting.
Absolutely fascinating. Well, just to give you an idea, I've seen, so let's call it a product like tinned vegetables. Tinned vegetables produced in South Africa versus tinned vegetables imported from Europe on the same supermarket shelf next to each other in South Africa. The imported product is cheaper. So we see it with our own eyes here in our own country.
Yeah. Well, they call that a export subsidy or export restitution. So you can, there's no question. If you just take the financials of it, they firstly have to produce. The chance that their production, their soil, the rent, the fertilizer, everything that they do there is cheaper than ours is probably impossible. But let's assume that's part one. Second one, then they have to put it in a tin. They have to cook it, whatever. Then they have to move it 9,000 kilometers. So, you can imagine what I would guess that the export restitution is probably higher than 40%, because the import sometimes tariffs will be lower. So if to be balanced out at 40% PSC, you can probably take your quite an accurate guess that imported tinned fruit, processed fruit will be, or vegetables will be, the subsidy effect will be more than 40% of the price.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that also prevents a lot of African stuff, as you say, anything from Africa going to first world countries, all the countries that have got the kind of money to subsidize their local people, and also implement preventative tariffs.
Yeah, look, I think that the opportunity is this. We had an old saying in the 90s when we worked in Europe, don't give us aid, give us trade. So stop sending money, because the EU and they all help, and EU sends subsidies to this, the old Lomé Convention countries, GSP countries, and America's got aid for everyone. It all distorts, because they distort principally the world production and the world price. If you allow countries like Africa, which has got, call it relatively, it's quite easy to produce food. If it's at a reasonable price, which will be much lower what the prices that Europeans pay, they would be able to do that. And the interesting thing about a lot of the effects when you intervene with minimizing subsidies, which we did in the early 90s, we got that level down by about 20% worldwide subsidies on agriculture. If you build any economy on a lower base, so if you don't pay, say, 100 Rand for grains, you pay 50 Rand, then the rest of the pricing for building a building and for manufacturing a car is cheaper, because the food price is lower. So the whole economy comes down and is much more efficient. So if you don't subsidize food, and food is traded by the best producing countries, with limits on food safety, and you can't put heavy metals on spraying on the crops and stuff like that. Then Africa and the developing world would do fantastically well with production of food. and the developed countries will also have less farmers, and those bigger ones will be more efficient and more competitive. So everybody would gain, and that, I think, is the dirty hands in agricultural trade, which I'm trying my best to untangle for South Africa on citrus. So that is that part.
So how dirty are the hands? Tell us, Deon. What's happening?
Just to say again, Dewald, that's why I missed that now.
How dirty are the hands busy working with all of these things for South Africa that you're trying to untangle?
Well, I'd like to give you a couple of names for them, and I'd like to polish up some of those individuals, but I think that would make me a persona non grata in Europe very quickly. I think the part which, let's just quickly unpack a little bit of the citrus approach. So what we sat with is South Africa's been exporting citrus to Europe for more than 100 years, and none of the pests that they are currently trying to regulate has ever established in Europe. So my argument is, if we're talking about a cold, so if I come and visit you and I've got a cold, and you don't contract it in 100 years, then I would argue, well, there's bloody small chance of this being, infectious. And that's the point. So you can take both CBS and FCM. Both of them have never established in Europe, and definitely not in citrus. So we've been arguing that there's a lot of hogwash. Now, the reason why we're really protective, or why we're really trying to open up the market and fight this thing, head on, is this. The total world production in citrus is 143 million tons. Substantial amount. China, for one, is just over 40. So, and it consumes everything except exporting 1 million tons. So you can think they take a heck of a lot of that. They produce themselves. So the point is, we've got two seasons: Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere. Southern Hemisphere of that 143 million tons is 30 million tons. So I think that's 18% of the total production comes from the Southern Hemisphere. But that 30 that we have in the Southern Hemisphere, 22 million tons of that is Brazil, which is mainly concentrate. So they haven't got a very, they've got a very, call it tropical conditions. So they've got huge orchards, but they're not cosmetically attractive. So, we're housewives, Louise, you would know. My wife's even worse. I mean, she's like a bloody inspector when she goes and buys fruit or vegetables from any shop, and I wouldn't name any names, but so women in the world are unbelievable what the quality that they require. I mean, they buy fruit. So if it's not attractive, they don't eat it. So Brazil has been by far one of the biggest juice manufacturers in the world, and from concentrate. So just to get back to my story, so South Africa, although we're the second biggest exporter in the world, I think we're the 12th or so biggest producer. We are bloody well small. We produce 2.6 million tons a year of that 143 million tons. So we're 1.6% of the world production. So we're nothing. And the Southern Hemisphere, if you take Brazil out, which is principally juice, the rest of us are 8 million tons. 8 million tons of 143. So you don't have to be an Einstein to work out that we have 3 or 4% of the world production, fresh production. And in this, South Africa's got this fantastic quality. So we've been growing. So firstly, we're extremely small. If normal access and normal consumption, and you guys know patterns of consumption now. So if you look at your consumption of any product, like we were before the international trade was so strong, we would have, say, peaches and apricots and for 4 months of the year, or 5 months of the year. And with breeding, we would have 5 or 6 months of production, and then we have to wait for next year. That's principally the same thing in the entire world. So if you look at citrus, you can probably cover 7 and even 8 months of production in your own country. So you can start early, keep it in cooling facilities, and then sell it. So that would be the first part. So for 4 months of the year, you're out of it. Now, any big multiple like Tesco, Sainsbury, Carrefour, Auchan, whoever, Lidl, Aldi, they want 12 months of supply. And that is very well underwritten or underscored by your guys. I mean, you guys eat avos now right through the year, or I do. I mean, I think avos did a brilliant. I mean, I know it's our time from roughly about February, March till about October, August, September. And then they're at their best because they're nice and oily and they tasty and so that's our season. But I eat avos three avos a week. I don't even know where they come from. They're probably Spain and, Mexico, who would I know? But it's a fantastic product. So you have a 12-month of the year commodity focus in consumption. And that's what everybody marketing fruit and vegetable want us to do. So what our opportunity for citrus is exactly that we have 4 months of the year that we can put it anywhere in the world and they wouldn't have. So be it mandarins, be it lemons, be it oranges, be it grapefruit, whatever, there'll be a gap somewhere. So if there's not a gap, it's because someone is meddling with his dirty hands, as you say, to keep the access. We don't have access, real good access to China, or we're starting to have some reasonable ones. We don't have it for India. And they are, I mean, both of them are 1.4 billion people. So we're scratching the surface. But I mean, if China was fully accessible, easy, we wouldn't be able to produce sufficient citrus. I mean, if they consume 40 million tons, I mean, we produce 2.6 million tons. And do a calculate, 8 months, 40, 2.6 months, we can quadruple our volume just for China. So the opportunity for South Africa is so fantastic. So if you stop all this meddling about, this you must have, got this illness, this sickness, and you focus on the real ones, and it's free trade, really free trade. South Africa is absolutely, it's at the start of its climb. So that's the point. And that's why
sorry, Deon. One of the big questions that myself and Louise discuss with each other while we're on our many kilometers sitting next to each other in a car is that it's all good and fine to produce 260 million cartons for this Vision260. And we've spoken out to Mitchell and Justin about how it's going to be moved and what the hopeful plan is. But the question we always ask each other is, are people going to buy it? Is there mouths that are going to eat it? But in what you're saying now is that there is too many mouths there are so many mouths out there that we will still not be able to provide enough citrus, even if we do 260 million cartons.
Yeah, look, in principle, you're right. The question obviously is at what price. So, we can produce it, we can put it there, and the guys will say, well, we need $18 or $16 a box or whatever. But I mean, a lot of that, just go back to the figures. The EU at the moment, the EU access that we have is costing us 3.8 billion rand a year, the measures. So I said we retained market access, but at a hell of a cost. So TBS as an argument is costing us around about 2 billion a year to do. FCM is very much the same, but because some of those activities on both, overshadow, it's about 3.7. Now, with 3.7 billion rand a year out of the production cost, we can put a huge amount of orchards down, get a hell of a lot of people new jobs, earn foreign currency, which the country desperately needs. So all of those. So just to get why the figures are important is that if every 10 million cartons, we export more. And I've been here since 2014. So if you do the calculation, we went from 110 million cartons, I think, in 2014 to about 165 last year, end of 2023. So in 9 years, we went up by 55 million cartons, South Africa, ducks export. That means that we have 55,000 new jobs in citrus. Now, that's gold dust. That's diamonds. You pick it up in the street. So South Africa has had the fantastic benefit or privilege that citrus without subsidies by growers who put their own money in. South Africa's not an easy country. We are difficult. Climate is tough. The government's not that softly inclined towards labor practices. The harbors are struggling. Infrastructure is under strain. Eskom is doing its bit. I mean, it's a tough country. In that time, these growers, 1,200, 1,300 of them, of which there's about 150, 200 black growers, have got it right to grow their product with 55 million in 9 years. That's nothing short of a bloody miracle. So we've put 55,000 new jobs down over the last year. The country should be ecstatic. The government should be supporting these growers massively because they can pull them out of a lot of big challenges and issues with regard to rural, socioeconomic position, foreign investment in growth, all of those. So citrus is in a fantastic position that it's suddenly entered the time what we call snack fruit. Now, you guys, Louise has been in the grape side of business for a long time, or she's come from that area.
Yes.
But if you look at what happened worldwide, what was the first product that really had what we call snack capabilities? It's a banana. So when I lived in Europe, there was a ship every day in Antwerp dropping 6,000 pallets of bananas, so every day. So that's a snack fruit. You take it, put it in your suitcase, go to the office, eat it there, throw it in the bin. Your hands are clean. Fantastic. That's a snack fruit. That's the modern way to eating a fruit. The second one was apples. So apple you can principally store for around about a year. Again, you eat it, throw away, clean hands. Third one, grapes, bullets. Fantastic product. In the early 90s, we made a massive amount of money because we were out of season. These punnets and the kids would come home, working, new modern kids, come home, drive past the Tesco outlet, pick up a punnet of grapes, or on the way into the office, and they would eat it, throw away the branches, and then fantastic. So what has citrus got to offer? Mandarins. Wow. Mandarins comes onto not the old Nazis that we used to throw at each other at Loftus Versveld, right out of the street. We've got this wonderful product that's, firstly, it's orange. It's dark orange. It's so attractive. Secondly, you put it next to your PC on a table. You skin it. You eat it. You throw away the peels. Wonderful taste. My kids didn't eat nachos, but they eat a massive amount of mandarins because it's so tasty, so modern, so enjoyable. So we've got that. Then suddenly we've got lemons. Lemons come from nowhere. My mother used to have it I think she took some, in boiled water in the morning for some sort of health thing, or a little bit in gin and tonic. God, now we have it in gins, we have it in shooters, we have it in beer, we have it in barbecues. It's all over the place, and you can't get enough of it. The growth was massive. When I started, we were 8 million cartons. We pushing 38 to 40 million on both of these in 8 years. So you've virtually probably nearly five times our stuff. So the growth is like that. I think the interesting thing for me was the fact that I thought that when I started is that Europe is actually a developed and a saturated market. Not true. We went from 43 million cartons in Europe in 2014 to 68 million last year. And where was that growth? Yes, mandarins, yes, lemons, but oranges. Suddenly, we've got these juicing machines in every damn supermarket, and they love it. They throw these South African oranges in them, they juice them, and they got fresh squeezed juice. Unbelievably. So we've grown in a what we would call a developed and a saturated market. We've grown by 53% in 9 years. Amazing. So
wow, that is phenomenal.
Yeah, can Europe? Of course, they can take more, and they love it. And all the great capabilities. We always end up with this argument about wine. What is a good wine? A good wine is something which pronounces. It's got pronounced acid. Why? Because your mouth is developed. Your tongue is a very specialized product. It's got the front of it will be sweet, and all the acid will be at the sides, the back of your tongue. And you always hear people talk about a long palate, and that's it. If a wine's got pronounced acid, it awakens your tasting buds at the back. So instead of having just a little bit of a sweet, the wine tastes nice and sweet in the front, you've got your full tongue becomes an active organ tasting. And that's the same with South African fruit. It's got unbelievable amount of acid with all the sugar. So if I give you 10 oranges, Brazil, Spain, whatever, and I tell you, get me the South African orange from there, take you 2 minutes. You'll taste it. The moment you taste the orange that comes from South Africa, you'll know it. It's just got that fantastic flavor.
Deon?
And that South African fruit says it's got a fruity flavor. That's why we're popular.
Yes.
The housewives like it.
Deon, you should be working in the marketing department.
Yeah. That's why I worked there for a while. So a little
I
bit
can
exercise.
tell.
No. So
No,
we've
well
got a
said.
fantastic story to tell, and the industry is, in my opinion, in the start of a great growth. We need to get the markets organized, market access. Justin is in India at the moment. I think that if we can get that one unlocked, we are going to fly. So,
but isn't India unlocked already? Aren't we sending oranges there already?
No, there's a very small, but I mean the conditions. So to get in, I mean, I just told you that if you look at the conditions that we need to go through for the EU on black spot, that costs about 2 billion a year. And India at the moment, you have to take it there. You have to do cold steri on quayside there, so it makes it extremely difficult. So yeah, you can get in, but I mean the cost of doing business is massively. So if you circumnavigate your way around I would call the bogus phytosanitary conditions, and now we're part of BRICS, so we should be cracking that one. And you can, I mean, sure, if there's something that we can. Some pest that we can carry over to India, I'd be really surprised. I mean, most of the citrus originally comes from China, and most of the stuff that was created havoc or the pests were already inherently there. So I don't think there's anything we can add. We just need to really brush up that the conditions under which we export is much less heinous, and it makes it much more practical. But I mean, if the fruit is just, I mean, there's the conditions at the moment. So I would take China, I would take India, the EU, America. America is still holding out, so that we've got some big challenges there as well, which we can talk about. So yes, in general, okay. Well, each to its own. So the main argument, I think in 2002, 2003, I was involved initially when we started our exports out of the Western Cape to America. And America was at the time the same position that EU had, that black spot, CBS, was a notifiable disease. So it was a quarantine disease. They said they didn't have it. And we tried to argue the same case there that we do with the EU and say, look, firstly, black spot, the fruit is not a pathway. So it's a leaf focused disease. So you need dried leaves with spores on to create that cycle of infecting a tree. And the climate needs to be conducive. So a summer rainfall area, because any fungus only operates when it's wet and warm. So that's why the Western Cape one is free of CBS, because any proud fungus needs those two things. And when we have water, it's cold, and if we have heat, it's dry. So no fungus operates well here. So as a consequence, the Western Cape, California, and the southern part of Europe are free of CBS. Not because of any reason, it's just the climate wouldn't support that fungus of survival, and that's why we argue that. So the EU and the US had the same approach, that we could export from the Western Cape, which was free of CBS, but not the non-CBS free areas. And then in 2008-9, they found CBS in California. And the other thing that the citrus industry does unremarkably well is that for the last 20 years, they spent an enormous amount of their own money on research in CRI. Now, that's also a bloody diamond if you want to look at one. They've created good. They've created more of the answers. So, I'm a salesman and I'm a marketer, and the Ricewood would be a bullshitter. But the point is that these guys have given us massive amount of ability to argue their case. So they presented a lot of information to America when they found that they had CBS. And hold and behold, the US recognized that the fruit is not a pathway. So the meaning is that you can't infect the country by sending oranges there if there's no leaves. And secondly, that the climate needs to be conducive. So guess what happened? America changed its policy from CBS being a notifiable pest to none. Principally because they could move fruit from Florida, which got CBS, summer rainfall region, to California, which is like the Western Cape, free of. So they are consistent with regard to the research. And then they allowed, on the back of the South African work, they allowed both Argentina and Uruguay to import into the US. They have not given that to South Africa because there is reciprocity in terms of trade. So they want something from us. And the something they want from us is pork shoulders and chicken wings. So in America, the breast of the chicken is the sort of a product, and the wings or the buffalo wings not so much. So they wanted to export that. So South Africa has got a tariff again, just like the same reciprocity. So they have tariff on import of pork shoulders and chicken wings, and they also got a citing for a zoosanitary, so animal health issue. So the US thinks, is of the opinion that the South African case on these two things are bogus, so it's holding out. So unfortunately, citrus at the moment is a little bit of a victim here in terms of the fact that the US would allow citrus from the call it the non-CBS free areas to go get to America. But in return, it wants access for its pork shoulders and chicken wings. So a little bit of a deadlock.
And we provided them with the info to open up that market for the other countries.
Yeah. We do most of those kind of things. We're really good with that. So CRI. Argentina and Uruguay don't have that capacity in terms of research. CRI does.
Why would they be very specific about a specific cut of meat, like a pork shoulder?
Well, very good question. The argument is that why would they send chicken wings? Just because that's a surplus product. They've got they use breast. The breast is very popular, so they've got a little bit of a surplus on chicken. So it goes to the subsidy effect. So they subsidize the chicken production a lot. So it competes unfairly. It will probably decimate and close a lot of production of chicken in South Africa. And on the pork shoulders, it's also a cheap cut. And the condition of South Africa is you can bring the pork shoulder in, but you have to open up. I think you guys would remember there's different diseases, and one of the ways in which you do it, if you want to sort of guarantee that your product is clean is that you remove the lymphatic and the nerve tissue in the shoulder or in any other cut, and then it's principally, it's fine. But they don't want to do that because it costs money, and it impacts on the call it the competitivity of exporting the pork shoulder. So South Africa says you can, but you have to do this cleaning up business, and the America doesn't want to. So the moment there's a bit of a standoff, we've been trying to unlock that quite a while. And hopefully I know there was a guy in America, Osama Dialisi, who was the administrator on plant health, and he's a lovely guy. And when one morning I was sitting in his office and I was complaining my case and whatever, and he looked at me and said, "Mr. Joubert, we really do owe you an answer. And it's actually nothing I can tell you which is scientifically based. All I can say is that there's big political heavyweights which are pushing against you. It has nothing to do with sanitary or phytosanitary cases. Your product is safe and it's the best in the world. So we would love to have it, but at the moment, politically, I can't give you an answer."
So daar's 'n vark in die verhaal iewers.
Unfortunately, there is, like in most cases.
And this is the world leader who is trying to do this, and yet on the other hand, they're trying to ban TikTok. It's unbelievable.
Look, I've got such wonderful friends in America, but I mean, our politics to me is a challenge. But I mean, theirs is, man, they make it difficult for themselves.
Yes.
I've got a question. Sorry, Louise, you ask.
I want to ask Deon, in light of the Vision260 principles and the strategy, you mentioned to me that one of the biggest problems that growers were facing was the incredible cost of shipping, particularly following the COVID shipping disruptions and the huge, massive increase in prices. You were saying that one of the things that you and your department have been working on has been to try and bring down the cost and alleviate that problem by providing some alternatives or some additional services. Do you want to maybe just talk about that, please?
Sure. Look, I think that we in the case where we did the study or the work on the EU and the cost, the opportunity cost of doing business with the EU, which is now officially done by BFAP, the Bureau for Food and Agriculture Policy. We've done a fantastic study on baseline costs for South African citrus and the cost of doing business with the EU in the case of CBS and the FCM. So we started using them more and more and more, and they did a baseline study in 2020, early of 2022, and we had an Indaba in Pretoria where they presented their case. And the case was this, that they, based on the study they did, is that that in 2022 April, 80% of the citrus growers were not making money. So 4 out of 5. And if we keep doing what that we're doing at that moment, we would be damn successful in closing down the industry. So, and the main culprit that they showed out, that I've got rough figures in my head, that they were talking about 40 Rand a carton for shipping, and it was up to about 80 Rand. So it was virtually double. And that was named as the main issue. So the board, the CGA board, and along with the growers, decided they should run a project to try and firstly see what we can do and what would be, what are the issues and how do we address it. So I worked for Case Spanning Logistics, so I was sort of ruffled in for that one. And I said, well, the only, I don't think I'm the right guy for it. I've been out of it for a while, and I know some of the players, but I think we need someone who's got a little bit more experience internationally. So, and I had a friend which I met in my previous life in Gayspan on the logistics side, Thomas Eskerson, who was the boss of Maersk, AP Moller refrigerated transport, and he was working as a consultant since about 2015. He broke away and started his own agency, advising people on shipping opportunities and the supply chain and stuff. And so I went to see him, and he came, and eventually the CGA, Hortgrow, various South Africa, Subtrops, and Sati, and then the Exporters Forum, FPEF. They contracted him for a period of about 2 years to do a study. In the first study, 3 months, did a deep dive on what's the issue, and they came back with a couple of things. And the one was that the fruit trade is immensely fragmented, which allows price manipulation and costing and whatever to run a rife, and that we only had two major players in the South African sector in shipping. And both these guys I knew very well. Both AP Moller and MSC are fantastic companies, and they do exceedingly well. But there's no, most other trades have up to 10 or 20 different companies competing in those trades, and you have less opportunities and less costing, and or let's say less aggressive costing. And he said the only way you're going to break the cycle permanently, because every time there's going to be a shortage, you're going to be, the pricing is going to outrun you. And he suggested we try and bring one of the top six shipping lines into South Africa to provide more opportunities and some competition. So we set about that task about sort of roundabout, I would say, August, September 22. And the fantastic look, it was a very tough exercise, I must say. I was pulled back into logistics big time, and we saw most of the big players worldwide. We spoke both to MSC and Maersk as well to try and expand. And eventually we got Hapag-Lloyd to buy into that, and they put a service in starting now in May. So we are absolutely delighted. And you can imagine the effect of that. So there's nothing about Hapag-Lloyd that they preferred above MSC or Maersk or AP Moller. It's just that we are of the firm opinion that the growers deserve better. They were virtually decimated financially by massive rises in price, virtually doubling in prices in the season, just because for no reason then there was no competition. Yeah. And since these guys have announced, guess what happened to the South African pricing on shipping? It's been very competitive, much better. The other thing that's wonderful is that the existing players are putting in new services, new opportunities. So it's had the desired effect. It's not trying to get at anybody, but it's just we need to give the growers an opportunity to be successful, and we cannot allow such a let's say limited opportunities and very, very overzealous pricing to destroy the industry. So I think the good thing that the growers in toto, not Citrus Exporters Forum, said never again. We will ensure that we got more opportunities, and this is part one. So Hapag-Lloyd is starting in about a month and a half time, which we're absolutely delighted with. And we're looking at other opportunities. We have challenges in the ports. We have challenges all over. And if we don't do something about it, we just had Indaba 2 weeks ago, which focused more on the harbors and what we can do to try and address and improve that situation. Because at the moment, the supply chain, in terms of cost and inefficiency, and it's all over, rail, the harbors themselves, the throughput in the harbors, the availability of ships, the costing, is for the first time really, I think, hampering and sort of limiting growth, and in fact undermining the industry's ability to be really competitive and provide opportunities and work for the South African population, especially in the rural areas where it's so desperately needed. So the industries in toto, I think, all the fruit industries, export industries, they talking to each other now. There's a joint forum. They try and do stuff together, and they try and influence the availability of opportunities to export. And I think they're going to stay in that space. They're not going to allow that again to run away with them, which I think is 100% understand that. And it, as I said, doesn't detract from any of the capacity or the service that they have up to now got from anybody, from shipping lines, from the ports and whatever. They just need more and more competitive and more alternatives. And I think that's the part that they're going to try and focus on.
So is there more shipping lines that's in the talks that could possibly
be
visited?
We look, the one part is that I was pulled back into a lot of the work that I used to do, but much more on the world stage than it was now. So it was a very nice exercise for me as well to get back into that. But we talked to 3 or 4 of the top 5, and those things will continue. We need more opportunities. We need the port to be world class. I mean, we absolutely delight as well with the international container operators, which are now to take over Durban Pier in April. They might be a little bit late on that, but I mean that is a definite step in the right direction. We think Transnet has a spot on there, and there's other ports too that need infrastructure, equipment, and private participation to private money, because the government cannot deal with all the demands on capital at the moment, and I mean private guys coming in partnership with the government, I think is fantastic. So if we can address Cape Town's challenges, which are numerous and big, and I think it virtually killed the grape industry. I think they took massive hits, Stonefruit guys. The same with Port Elizabeth. So I think that's the way to go. So we really hope that we'll have more opening up of the harbors and put them on world class. I mean, I think you guys have seen the World Bank report that cited us, our harbors at something like 348 to 352 of the 352. It is terrible. We were at the top bottom. I think one of our harbors have moved slightly up, but I mean, we need world class harbors. I mean, top 50 in the world. They need to be really efficient. And we still, and that's some of the Iskerson advisory recommendations was South Africa is still in the top spot in the world. We just saw it with the Suez Canal collapsing, that we're still the fantastic place, halfway in the east and west. And I mean, in my export life, our harbors were very well used as places of assembly. So they'd have a string running to South America. They would drop off in PE. That there would be a string running to the Far East. Hell of efficient, and our harbors were doing fantastic. Where we are at the moment is just absolutely it's not the place we should be. And if we can get efficiencies up again at running the top 50, I mean, South Africa is a fantastic place to have shipping come in, load off, conglomerate, move up and down, and it just makes it massively efficient. So I think that we really hope becomes a more of a norm than the exception like it was in this case. So we're really betting on this new endeavor of Transnet with private partnership involvement to unlock the massive potential that we have in the harbors.
I've got a question on that subject and government and the whole bank shoot. Is that, have you guys been in discussion with political parties? Because our election is in less than 80 days. Should there be a swing in the government, is the parties that could possibly be taking over in a position to have plans in place already?
I don't know that, but what I can tell you is that the discussions at the moment with Transnet is really under the new leadership is really, there's a lot of promise. And in Indaba there was some feedback on the work streams and that the private the private sector has with Transnet. There's a lot of great work going on. I think I saw this morning that they announced that some of the lines, there's now tenders out for participation in the railway lines. I mean, let's be honest, fruit is very heavy, so is ore. And I think our roads have taken a terrible beating over the last 10, 20 years being transported on road. Yeah, it's efficient, but I mean, the trucks have been trampling us, I mean, to death. And rail, which has a fantastic infrastructure, should be running, I would say, door to door and, truck to truck, or trains should be virtually standing one behind the other in terms of moving fruit from our production areas to the harbors, and the same with ore. So, I mean, I think there's fantastic opportunity. So I really hope that, if we have this discussion in 10 years, our harbors on the top 50 in the world, our railways are being used very efficiently to move citrus from the north and grapes from the Orange River and, whatever, everywhere in the world, and all the ore that's coming from the northeast or the northwest are just like the Sisson project. I mean, that's a great example of those built 20, 30 years ago or longer, and it's still working very well. And there's other opportunities for harvest as well. I know one of the operators said to us that Saldanha offers a fantastic opportunity for a new, fresh fruit harbor. They'll build it, if they get an allocation and a license, they'll build it for free with a 30-year, allocation. So there's a lot of opportunities if we do the right things and we unlock the right partners to participate. And in that fold, anybody in the world that's a top operator of harbors, could be MSC, AP Moller, it could be Invest, could be DP World, could be anyone, would be fantastic operators, just like the Indonesian guys that's taken over got the license for Durban. So it's not that you favor anyone, you just want good operators and good competition, which will provide consistent and competitive pricing and opportunities. And I think that's so the citrus industry and the fruit industry it's on no one's side. It's on its own side. It needs those opportunities. So the more we have of them, the better.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you very much. I think we are running over an hour already. So I think we should maybe move towards wrapping up. And Deon, if you any parting comments looking down the road, especially with the idea of Vision260, we've discussed many things, but do you have a particular vision for the future or
message?
Any message?
Well, I think the one is of hope and opportunity. I mean, as I said, South Africa is small. We're small in the world. We have massive opportunities. Our growers are world class. If you look at the way that they put themselves in a position where they are now, where they can produce and provide, not only foreign investment or foreign returns in foreign currency, we can grow tremendously. We can get a lot of opportunities for additional work. The one thing I didn't mention is that one part of the CGA, which I'm really extremely proud of, is we've got a part where we spend a lot of money in the academy for mostly for bursaries for kids from previously disadvantaged communities and studying, and we absorb something like 85 or 80% of them back in the industry. I think there's 600 or 700 of them that went through that process, and with a bursary, got a degree, got a diploma, working in citrus now. I mean, that's fantastic. The Vision260, in my opinion, is an expression of what we see as possible. And if you think that, in deregulation, we were 33 million cartons, we're now talking, we're 170, 180. And then in due course, say in another 6-7 years, we'll be at 260 million cartons. It's an unbelievable road of growth, not subsidized, not assisted, just because there's an opportunity. And so what are the opportunities for South Africa? Is to grow that and do more of the same, and be smart, and and look at opportunities and clean up our market access in all these countries, and go and pronounce free trade and break down barriers. So I'm very, very positive, and in fact I think it's a fantastic future. It's got all the building blocks of being a massively successful long-term business for everyone in South Africa. And I would just plead that the government allows them the space, and supports the endeavors in market access, and allow the private sector to assist in logistics, and trade lanes, and the harbors, the railway, and the infrastructure to have efficient supply chains. We need business. Business will unlock a lot of opportunities, and will definitely make a big impact on South African growers and the community at large.
Sure. Thank you very, very much. It's been incredible chat. It's been incredible chatting to you. I think we'll wrap up the broadcast, but don't go anywhere yet. Just hang in there.
I'll stick around.
Thank you, Deon. We really appreciate it. And really appreciate everybody watching, there's quite a few consistent viewers today, no questions. But yeah, thank you to those people who are watching.
Thank you, Deon. It's been a pleasure spending time with you guys.
All right.